Hello, this is a short video, although not as short as I would like it to be, on the subject of why one might wish to consider avoiding gluten and wheat. The list gets longer, so it may not be the 5-minute one I intended. So let's have a look at the reasons why. Now, gluten and wheat may cause a whole range of symptoms, from acid reflux and something called eosinophilic esophagitis, which is an inflammation of the throat, bloating, constipation, wind, that causes fatigue, joint pains and sore knees, for example, can be caused by wheat, headaches. And then there's dermatitis herpetiformis, which is a specific condition of the skin linked to gluten, and eczema. Now, you can have more than just celiac disease and so on to wheat. You can have non-celiac gluten sensitivity too. So there's an IgE-mediated immediate allergy to wheat. Then there's non-IgE mediated, which is a delayed allergy. It could be linked to the IgG response to it. You can have celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition. There's also can be fermentation in the gut due to fructans, and we'll cover that in a moment. And also there can be a gluten sensitivity that's non-IgG related somehow. So the number of different things, and I think I've got 16 different reasons here, and so let's see how quickly we can go through it. But this hopefully is support for you in your desire to have as diverse and healthier diet as possible by excluding wheat from your diet. I get asked the question a lot by clients. So here we go. So wheat can lead to an increased intestinal permeability through the release of zonulin. And for that reason, gluten is potentially bad for everyone, in fact. So regardless of whether you have gluten intolerance, gluten might affect you negatively. 100% of humans, gluten causes your intestines to start letting molecules of food and bacteria into your bloodstream from your gut. This is a direct result of gluten causing your body to produce this protein called zonulin, which opens up tiny holes in your intestines, which is then referred to as leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability. The impacts of a leaky gut are too numerous to share in this short video, and different people may experience different symptoms. Some people may not experience symptoms immediately, but wait for it. You might get them later. But some of the common symptoms are development of allergies, arthritis, and silent inflammation, which makes it harder for your body to be optimally well. No, number two, which is very much linked, and some of these will be linked and easy to follow, and others will just be random negative factors of wheat. So number two, wheat causes intestinal inflammation. Wheat has its own lipopolysaccharide, LPS, like molecule, sometimes referred to as LPS at small w, which has similar effects to this lipopolysaccharide, also referred to as endotoxin. So wheat remarkably effective at activating the bacterial defense mechanisms of our immune cells in our gut. So wheat leads to intestinal inflammation. Now, apart from gluten, potential dietary triggers include non-gluten wheat components such as amylase trypsin inhibitors, or ATIs, wheat germ agglutinin, that's a toxic molecule, WGA, and fructans. I'll come on to those just now. So wheat contains molecules that are very potentially active when it comes to dendritic cells, and they're called alpha amylase trypsin inhibitors, or ATIs. Now, they typically act within the plant as a natural pesticide. They act through something called the toll-like receptor 4 on the dendrites. Now, sorry to say that those of you who love to say you're gluten-free, unfortunately the ATIs, which exist in other grains, are found in a different part than gluten itself. These natural pesticides in wheat, these ATIs, are also an indication as a potential cause of non-celiac gluten sensitivity and inflammation. And then this other molecule, number 5, wheat germ agglutinin, WGA, belongs to something called the lectin group, a superfamily of carbohydrate-binding proteins that present a variety of plants with a protective role against external pathogens. So again, whilst toxins in food can elicit healthy responses to us, and that can be part of why they're good for us. In this instance, the wheat germ agglutinin, although it's protecting the wheat itself, is actually not good for us. So over thousands of years of selective wheat breeding, in order to obtain increasingly higher protein content, the concentration of WGA, wheat germ agglutinin lectin, in wheat has increased proportionately. It is a compact, stable protein, highly resistant to degradation. So naturally it's a component part of wheat, and it's a toxic compound and an anti-nutritional factor. It can bind and pass through the gut barrier to interact with immune cells beyond that. It then promotes a highly inflammatory process, including turning dendritic cells on. WGA has exhibited toxic and inflammatory effects by disrupting epithelial integrity, that's the inner lining of our skin, and inducing the synthesis of pro-inflammatory cytokines, including something called interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 8, by peripheral blood mononuclear cells. Wheat germ agglutinin over time reduces our body's ability to absorb nutrients from any food, And it does it by damaging the microvilli, which then inhibits the absorption of vitamins and minerals. Wheat germ agglutinin, best avoid. Number 6, fermentation in the gut due to fructans, not to do with gluten itself, and this is why it's in the FODMAP group. So owing to a small size of fructans, they're osmotically active, which means they have an impact on fluid balance, and they rapidly ferment by the gut bacteria of the large intestine. The combination of its osmotic activity with fluid retention within the intestinal lining and the lumen, and the gas production by fermentation of the oligosaccharides and polyols induces a variety of symptoms, particularly bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Number 7, the risk of exposure to mold toxins and mycotoxins increases when we eat any grain, but also particularly wheat. In this way, all wheat products are a likely source of mycotoxins. These are extremely robust and resilient to degradation. Actually, not far off a description of wheat germ agglutinin. No cooking or heating destroys these mycotoxins. Studies conducted in numerous countries confirm the presence of mycotoxins in the wheat flours that are obtained there, and grains as well. But grains are usually contaminated with multiple mycotoxins at the same time. A Dutch study in 2021 showed that mycotoxins are most frequently observed above the limits of quantification. Now, any amount is not good. Were something called deoxynivalenol, which is referred to as DON. A lot of these complicated names have a suitably short acronym. So DON, something called eniatin B and B1 and HT2 toxin, and something called zearalenone or Zen. On average, DON was detected in 54% of those samples from Holland, ranging from 19 to 92%, depending on the year of the study. The flowers were studied. In an Italian study, grown between 2009 and 2011, the occurrence of DON was 80 or 90% present. In a 2021 Brazilian study, they found legislated and non-legislated mycotoxins in wheat flour samples. DON was the mycotoxin present in 100% of the analysed samples. Zen was identified in 51% of the samples, and HT2 was detected in 13.5%. So again, we got occurrence of these mycotoxins. In an Albanian study in 2020, apparently it was the first of its kind, they discovered that fusarium toxins were found in 23% of the wheat samples and 78% of the maize samples, that's corn. In the wheat samples, the only detected fusarium mycotoxin was DON, so again we're getting used to that term now, which is present in 23% of samples. The EU permitted level was exceeded in this particular study. In China, in 2022, the detection rates of mycotoxins in wheat flours ranged from 0.7, so a tiny amount, to 75%, and their average contamination in wheat flours were close to the existing regulations permitted in cereals. However, their co-contamination rate was as high as 98%, so effectively there's always more than one. Now, number 8. Moving on from the toxins, wheat is not nutritious at all. Why would we choose to eat wheat? It has a low nutritional value. The high heat drying that's often effectively the wheat goes through that process destroys what nutritional value is left, making it a very low source of vitamins and minerals, which is true. It is true of other grains like rice, quinoa, barley, and corn, and so on. Compared to other healthy foods such as spinach, broccoli, salmon, berries, eggs, beef, etc., wheat has about as much nutritional value as cardboard. Number 9. Wheat is loaded with phytates. Phytates, these are small molecules, and they bind to vitamins and minerals like zinc and copper and iron and magnesium, and they keep our body from absorbing them. Number 10. We don't need wheat fibre. If we have lots of vegetables and some fruits, you're getting fibre enough anyway. Certainly if you have digestive issues or IBS, wind bloating, excess fibre will make it worse with all likelihood. Number 11. Genetically modified. Almost 100% of the wheat in the US has been genetically modified by hybridization or back crossing or mutagenesis. So these processes effectively create more unknown and unwelcome side effects. Before wheat was genetically modified, it contained much less gluten and didn't cause as many health problems. Hence the fact that some people who can't tolerate modern wheat, if they eat an old grain like kamut or spelt, they may be fine symptomatically. Number 12 of 16, it's awful for your blood sugar. Wheat has been genetically modified, now contains superstarch called amylopectin A, and that causes the wheat to spike your blood sugar. Did you know that eating 2 slices of whole wheat bread can increase blood sugar more than 2 tablespoons of pure white sugar? Frightening. Okay, if you're healthy, then maybe this will just cause inflammation and won't cause a problem and make your liver work over time, and you'll store a bit more fat. But for someone who's diabetic or pre-diabetic, and that's linked with metabolic syndrome, which affects 66% of the adult population in the UK, the consequences are worse. Because of this, eating wheat may lead to the same effects as eating sugar, including insulin resistance, weight gain, and belly fat. Number 13. Wheat is doused in pesticides from seed to storage. In its lifetime, wheat is sprayed with pesticides, insecticides, and fungicides. We know why. The fungicides are sprayed because they're looking to inhibit the mold, which then produces the mycotoxins. And if insects are found enough in the samples and the bins, they're often fumigated with toxic gases as well. Now, glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide, and since the late 1970s, one of the most extensively used in farming against weeds that interrupt the process of growth of soy, corn, and wheat. In a paper published in 2013, glyphosate was described in terms of its negative impacts on intestinal microbiota, micronutrient absorption, enzymatic detoxification, and serotonin signaling. The Food Standards Agency in the UK reports that the use of Roundup, which contains glyphosate, as a wheat desiccant, so it dries it, results in glyphosate residues regularly showing up in bread samples. The active ingredient in Roundup lethally disrupts all important something called shikimate pathways found in the beneficial gut microbes, which is responsible for the synthesis of critical amino acids within us. So pesticides. Ugh. Wheat, number 14. Wheat is addictive. Interesting. Quite apart from its sugar-like effects, which could make it addictive, wheat contains peptides with opioid-like activities, which include something called gluten exorphins. Gluten is a protein composed of two proteins, glutenin and gliadin. Glutenin gives it elasticity. Imagine a pizza dough being stretched, and the Italian chef spinning it around their hands. So that's thanks to glutenin. Gliadin has been found to mirror the effects of opiates in brain receptors, and it stimulates appetite and creates cravings for more and more gluten. It is this addictive tendency, in part, that's led manufacturers to feature wheat in many processed foods and other foods, knowing that people will come back for more. And wheat certainly features in a high number of ultra-processed foods, UPFs, which unfortunately in the UK represents 51% of the average shopping trolley. Frightening. Number 15. Wheat has neurotoxic properties. Did you know that in the 1970s psychiatrists found that removing wheat from the diets of schizophrenics, it led to dramatic improvements in their symptoms? They also found that symptoms worsened again when wheat was reintegrated back into the patient's diets. This phenomenon was eventually traced to the presence of this gliadin substance, which, besides being addictive, can also lead to a host of neurological complications. Some of these include hypersensitivity and outbursts in ADHD patients, increased mania in bipolar individuals, and worsened food obsessions in those with eating disorders. Wheat gliadin has also been linked to peripheral neuropathy and gluten encephalopathy, which is a form of dementia. And lastly, with air, number 16, for the sake of variety and diversity, avoid wheat and choose other whole foods, and preferably not other grains with some of the same issues as wheat. So let me just put this into context. The remote Hadza tribe of Tanzania consume only whole foods. They have no refined processed foods. And they consume as much as 600 foods over a year. From stool testing, it was found that they have an around 50% greater ecological diversity of their gut microbiome compared to the average Westerner. The further away a person's diet gets from a modern Westerner's diet, the more diverse the range of microbes they have in their intestines. So consider this. The average Briton derives about 30% of all their caloric intake from just one food, wheat. If you consume a variety of other foods instead of wheat, this means you will be expanding your diet and not restricting it. Listen up. Thank you for listening. There's 16 reasons to avoid wheat. And if you're interested, and certainly these books have been on my shelf for a while, in 1992, Dangerous Grains by Dr. Brady and Ron Hogan. So that's 1992. It's leafed through. And then 1995, Against the Grain by Jax Peters Lovell. Against the Grain. And then 2011, Dr. William Davis wrote Wheat Belly. You may have heard of that one, Dr. Wheat Belly. And then the fantastic Dr. David Perlmutter wrote Grain Brain, published in 2014. So, reasons not to eat wheat. Thanks so much for listening.